All right. So happy Saturday. You're probably not watching this on Saturday, but I'm producing it on Saturday, so happy Saturday. And one of the great things, and I really appreciate this about the students that are in the classroom, because some of you are, more or less taking it online. So the folks who show up, we have really great discussions about where we're heading with the rest of the material. So based on their feedback, I've done the following. So I've went ahead and laid out all the work for the rest of the semester. So we're moving into week 13 here, and let me go over some changes I've also done for those of you that may not have heard this regarding how homework will be submitted and then the focus of classwork from here to the end. So first, on the free code camp, based on your feedback, I've decided to, instead of having you create the HTML that has the content and your code, is you can just complete those items that I show. So in this case, let me just go ahead and look at this. Let me scroll down to week 13 so you can see, right? So once you complete the items here for the free code camp, then just give me a print screen of those items having been complete. And then what you can do here is just upload it into your My Homework, and you can just call it Day 25 PNG, and then give me a link to it. Okay, so you'll see this pattern for free code camp from here to the end. Again, listening to your feedback about that. So going back, the other thing, so just while we're on the vein of talking about homework, then on the free code, on the JavaScript, the weird parts, the difference here will be is I want you to code up the examples that he covers, the code examples that he does, and you can just do it in and you can call it day 26.js. And you can link it to some. HTML file so that you can look and make sure your code runs, which you need to. But when you submit, you can just give me a link to your JS file in your repo. Okay, so those that's the difference you'll have. And so if you look at the spreadsheet, you can see that what I've done here is I've laid out the rest of the remaining of the semester as far as homework. And I am, when we get to the JSON APIs in Ajax and free code camp, I am going to look for some non-jQuery examples of doing this. Although there's nothing wrong with understanding how, because jQuery is just much cleaner, by the way, for much easier to do, much less code, but it is good to understand how to make these calls without it as well. So I'm looking for some content, and that would be the only that this might change. Otherwise, the thing we're going to do as we move to the end is cover some algorithms and then finish up the very last day of class, the day 34, week 17 is finish up as far as we could get into the JavaScript, the weird parts, and I'd recommend you watch the whole thing. Okay, because there's not a lot more here, but when he actually gets in, opens up jQuery and starts looking at it, I think that's really beneficial for you to see, because in concept we could all be writing our JavaScript as if it is a jQuery-like framework library concept, and I've noticed that with writing Firebase code, that's how I'm doing it. So I'm just getting used to that pattern of running everything inside of an IFE. Okay, so that's homework. So the other thing is that as I looked, and this was again a really great discussion in class, what we talked about, and you will see this reflected in all the classworks, and I'll just go ahead and go into one of these. Now, FYI, this is subject to change, but my hope is not to actually have to change too much of it. So what I've said here is here's the things that you really need to complete between now and the end of the semester, right? So you need to log into Firebase or local storage, because I'm not going to mandate you go to Firebase, but I can just tell you there's a lot of reasons why you might want to, but you can also do all this functionality in local storage if you want. So logging into Firebase local storage with form validation and log out, and a sign up for Firebase or local storage with form validation. Okay, and then present user specific data into the login, and then handle the user specific sign up data capture. So you think about when you sign up for a new app, there's generally a process to walk you through as a new user the things you need to tell them to help them give you good data. Okay, so, and this would just be the counter to that, is that once a user has done that, then you want to present some user specific data into their login. And then implement some geolocation functionality. We're just seeing more and more websites, I've noticed, wanting my geolocation. And what's great about this is from the browser perspective, I can say yes or no. Because sometimes there's websites that want this, and I'm like, no, there's really no need for you to have this, so I can make that choice. And then implement something with Ajax functionality. Now these are concepts we're going to be covering, but this is a way to go out and get various types of data, mostly JSON data, and process it into your app to gather that. But there are also other ways to do this now called fetch, but just something. And we'll talk more about this in the coming weeks. And then the last item here, and again, I caveat this by saying maybe not the last item, but if I don't foresee any other major requirements, is that do user testing. And this is where you would really, once you feel like your site is at a place where you'd want to know how the user experiences it, sit down, put them in front of it. Don't tell them don't give them pointers, but give them specific, like sign up, right? Log in, right? And then maybe go through this process and then capture what you see the user doing. And you'll be and we'll talk about this more, but you'll be so tempted to want to tell them how to do it. And really, if you have to tell them how to do it, it's probably things you need, it's things you need to work on in your user interaction, user experience. Okay, so let's go back here. So what you do here is for every day, what you'll do, and you need to be making progress, is you'll create a new directory called My App Work, and inside of it you'll create a file with that day and report on your progress as it relates to these items. And this really came out of, again, the really great in-class discussion, and this specifically came from Stephen, where he says it'd be nice, because we're all at a little different place, to have at least a roadmap, and then we can somewhat pick and choose the areas we want to implement or the timeline we want to implement them. Okay, so that's what you're going to see. Again, could be some change here, but what I went ahead and did to roll this out is I just copied and pasted that into each of the classworks from here to the end. Okay, so that's that. And then the other thing we talked about in class, and I want to tell everybody this option as well, one of my favorite computer science online courses, not online, but massive courses, is CS50, right? So CS50 out of Harvard by David Malin. And in week 10, which right now week 10 just got recorded and it's not available, but he records a week 10 behind the scenes. So I'll give you this link, but if you want to wait until next week, you can check out the actual one he records with people in the hall. But this is all about JavaScript, and I think it really lays out a really good case for that. We've covered a lot of good things related to what most people need to know, and also some areas that we need to make sure we have covered for you. So this is not required, this is optional, but here's my thing, that is, if you do this and you take some notes, and you watch the whole 2 hour, well, in this case, the one that actually will come out next week, it might be 2 hours. His lectures typically run an hour and a half or so. But if you watch the whole thing and take notes, then what I will allow you to do is submit 2 things late without points removed from either past stuff or stuff coming up in the future. So by watching the entire thing, taking notes, and then I don't have anywhere in Canvas for you to submit this. You would just, do it up and push it up to the repo and then give me a link and then tell me which items those are that you want to get either points back, late points back, or, bank it for the future. Not a lot of future here though, because we are heading downhill quickly. Okay, so the other thing is, I did, I went and looked at, and there is some great content. So as those of you, which I get the feeling most of you will do this, is to implement Firebase. Man, is there some good content out there beyond the Firecast stuff that's so well produced. But this one, the deep dive into the relational database, is excellent. The Firebase data design, so good. I mean, it was like when I was listening to that, it really helped me understand that, I already knew Firebase was a JSON, but it's also a tree, so that you can have branches, but understanding that anyway, there's just a lot of really great information here. So check that out. Like I said, I just searched, this is my history actually of what I've been listening to lately, and all 3 of these were just very excellent. So what I will end with is this, which is, and I showed this in class, and for those of you that didn't make it into class, demo day I thought was really successful, and I'm really proud of you all and the work that you've done. And even if you didn't demo, I mean, most people are just doing a really conscious, really attempting to have their apps be something they're very proud of. So, and I walked students through it and showed them, my app at the end, and we had a really great discussion about it. And I'm really proud of the state that it's in right now. But boy, and when I look at the requirements that I set out for us, I'm about halfway there almost. So I'm excited about that, but I'm also excited to work with you individually for how to do this. But let me just show you my code as it exists today for implementing my version of my current app, right? So I like I said, my JavaScript is all wrapped in an IFE like most common frameworks. And then this stuff is just copied right out of the Firebase console. And it's just stuff you have to set up, and then you have to initialize it. And then they set up, and I went ahead and did this because I think it's good, constants. So constants versus variables would be items that cannot change, they're immutable. And then I set up some other variables I would need. I gave a data, so I said reference the database because I use the database to capture user specific data. I have a lot more work to do with that. That little menu item there, what I did is I just added an event listener on each one of them. And then to show the current menu, what I did there is I just took the class away. But to me, it turned out pretty well as far as the implementation of that. So those were the add event listeners for all those. And then here is the login. In the login add event listener here, went ahead and showed, I hid the menu, and then I grabbed the text. And by the way, this is actually where, so in this login, I need to write some validation beyond just required, because it's not there right now, and attempt to grab some of these messages that come in from the authentication of Firebase, because there are some good messages, so I would want to do some of my own validation and take advantage of their messages, right? But then here, so I grab the email, I grab the password, and then I say authenticate with the email and password, passing it these 2 values. And what happens is that call has a promise, right? So a promise comes back, and I know we haven't talked about promises at all, so except for the video if you watch the implementation. And there is some content I'm going to look for in the next week or so that we can get a better understanding, because it's definitely a more advanced concept, or the next advanced, more sophisticated concept of a callback. So moving on, so I have the sign up process, and so what I did here is when a user signs up, then I created a true variable, set it to true that the user is new. Again, there's nothing new here, it's just capturing those field values. And then actually what I ended up doing was I did when a user signs up, so what I did here is when we start sign up, then I also capture their name, right? And then completing it. So what I ended up doing here is I had a sign up, but before that got run, I did start sign up so that I could show that other field to grab that username. And this is really where I would expand this process to grab more user specific data that I wanted. And then on the log out, so these are just listening for events. So on the log out, it logs out of Firebase and it reloads the window. Okay. So this is really the big one right here, which is the authentication. So I have a couple of variables that I set globally so that I could globally in terms of the IFI, right, in terms of the function that's called immediately. And then this is great, because what this does is if any change to the authentication, then this code will run. And then you can just say, if you have a Firebase user, which means they're authenticated, then I ask the question, are they new? And if they're new, then I write to the database their information. I grab it, I grab their UID, which is their unique identifier, and then I do some other processing to the UI, and then I show them the data, right? And else, right, then I just present them, they're not logged in, and this is a console message, but then I just hide the log out button. Okay, and then this is actually, when I called this, sorry, this actually wasn't, this called the function for writing the data, and this is actually where that data gets written right here. And I will end once I finish this showing you the Firebase side, but in this case I did show fake data, and basically I just nested some timeouts to make it look like data. So let me go ahead and complete the sign in process. So right now, oh, here we go. So here's my, oh, I gotta fix that. That's actually a hangover. It should have. So this is showing the user data, user specific data, but not quite user specific data yet, because it's generic to any user. So this would be my next step, is to actually store these into Firebase, and then I can log out, and then I get back where I was. Okay, so the last thing I will show you is the Firebase console, just so you can see this part. And I'll go to my console here. Where's it at? My screen's so small, sometimes it's hard to see. Getting started. Hold on, let me make this just a little bigger. Hold on. Yeah, my screen was so small it was not showing the console, so I had to increase it. So here's my project, right? And then in the project authentication, I only have right now sign-in methods of email. So in this case, I would like actually to implement the Google and possibly some of these other ones, because I hear they're really easy to do. But the other thing you do here under data, somebody's calling me, sorry, so I'll have to just kind of let that happen. So here's on the database where I have users, and this number right here, this UUID, is unique to each user. So when I write to the database, this is the way you write user specific data, is you match that. And so what I mean by that is if I go to authentication and I look, so this UID is a unique identifier for each user. So then when I write to the database, what happens is when I match that up and I grab that UID and I write to the database by, I think in this case I use a set. I think that's what is used. Yeah, so this is the actual code that in this case is writing to the database, right? When I write to it, then I write as a UUID, so then that isolates that data to only be viewable by that user. That's user specific data. Okay, I hope this kind of helps you wherever you're at in this class. Do reach out, for those of you mostly taking this online. Probably the best reason to come in is when you're stuck and you just want some extra help to kind of get to the next place. So make sure you're taking advantage of that. And I will show you that on Thanksgiving, because we're only together one day that week, that's the day you only have that item, those homework and classwork. Okay, have a great rest of your week, and I'll talk to you soon.